Welcome, Phil. Thank you so much, Phil, for joining with us this evening. And we just bless you as you teach us what you guys are doing at the sports chaplaincy. So welcome. The platform is all yours.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and good evening, everybody. I'll just share my screen with you. Hopefully you can now see that. That works?
Yep, that
Wonderful.
does.
Excellent. That's much better than looking at my ugly dial anyway, so hopefully it'll keep you entertained while I'm talking. And I will try to keep it brief, I promise. So a little bit of an introduction about myself. I'm National Director of Sports Chaplaincy in New Zealand. I came to faith in 1978 as a newly married 21-year-old straight out of the army. My wife and I have been in full-time Christian mission since 1982. We started with YWAM back in the day, and also helped plant a Baptist church in Hamilton during that time, before we moved over to YWAM England in 1990 with our four young children. We continued on in YWAM. I was doing a course in church planting and church leadership, and then was appointed, after leaving YWAM in 96, sorry, I was appointed as Diocesan Missioner for the Liverpool Diocese. Didn't seem to matter that I wasn't an Anglican. And I had a ball there. It was a wonderful time. And it was during then that I was appointed as the first chaplain to St Helens Rugby League, which was a part-time voluntary role. Used to take up between 6 and 8 hours a week, and that was something I did for the last 10 years that we were in the UK. We came home to Aotearoa, New Zealand in 2009, and I was called to be the senior pastor of Morrinsville Baptist Church, which I served until I was appointed as the National Director for SCNZ in 2018. So that'll just give you a bit of a, I'll see if I can make my screen work. That's a little bit about who I am and who I am currently, my role with SCNZ. So one of the questions people have is, who is SCNZ? We're a Christian charity, and we support the well-being of athletes and sports-related people around the country. And we do this by primarily by identifying, training, and then placing volunteer sports chaplains into clubs and teams and school sport. So at all levels of sport, from high performance to school, and all codes around the country. Over the last 11 years that we've been a charity, we've grown to 110 sports chaplains, and our chaplains are working in 23 different sports codes. We have MOUs with 5 national sporting organisations, including Basketball New Zealand, Volleyball New Zealand, Motorsport New Zealand, Rugby League, and Gymnastics New Zealand. And one of the things we are delighted to see is we've been growing very rapidly over the last 6 years, particularly. We train about 50 people a year, of 30 of whom go through to be new chaplains each year. But even at this rate, we can't keep up with the demand, and there are many more opportunities than we have chaplains to place around New Zealand. In terms of our kaupapa, what we seek to do is make available free pastoral care and wellbeing support without any prejudice or precondition to everybody and anybody involved in sport who requests our help. And we serve by the invitation of the sports entity. Our chaplains are there. They act as first responders, and they help people find and access professional help if that is needed. So in terms of well-being, they're really the boots on the ground in sport. You probably are painfully aware, as we are, of the sad death of Olivia Podmore, who, as one of our elite cyclists, had a lot of well-being support around her. But there was one thing missing, and that was an independent, confidential presence who she could turn to, who would not then report back to her coach or anybody else in the organization. And that is one of the problems we find in sport today, that the well-being is often provided at a national level, But as we've discovered, most people who you stand on the sidelines of their sport, they're not going to pick up a phone and ring somebody in some ivory tower somewhere. So we're there to provide that care, to be that confidential presence, and to meet people at their point of need, and do so in a way that doesn't actually damage their prospects as an athlete. One of the things that we adopted very early on was what is known as Te Whare Tapawhā, as a model of hauora, or well-being. And so we attend to people's mental, emotional, spiritual, and their relational well-being. And also we would speak into their physical well-being. If we saw somebody was in danger of hurting themselves, we would want to suggest that they think again. All of our sports chaplains are committed followers of Christ. They're endorsed by their church, and they willingly give up 4 to 6 hours a week as a chaplain through rain, hail, snow, sleet, whatever the weather chucks, including the sunshine. A lot of them are working in team sport, but we have others that are in more individual sports as well. As a charity, we're entirely funded by donations. We don't ask for money from sport. As you'll be well aware, he who pays the piper, he calls the tune. And so if we were paid by Sports New Zealand or one of the national sporting organisations, then they could tell us how to go about our business. Whereas because we are entirely independent, we can be a Christian presence within that sport. But that means that we're reliant on the kindness of people, either through supporting one of our staff members. So all of our staff members, myself included, live by faith. We trust the Lord to provide for us. And then I find the extra funding through Christian charities and philanthropic businesses who love what we do and want to support us in that. Well, in terms of our chaplains, they are all volunteers, and we ask that churches support their volunteers and recognise that their chaplain is really a missionary from their church. So we don't invite people to join Sports Chaplaincy New Zealand. What we do is we train and equip people and enable them and help them to be missionaries within their own context, their own catchment of their church. And the ideal situation is when a church recognizes their chaplain, supports their chaplain, and in fact seeks to find more chaplains so that every sporting context within their catchment area has a chaplain within it. That's the general model. Obviously, we're very dependent on the goodness of God and His kindness through His people. We're dependent on having a team of people who pray for us and with us regularly. It's a ministry that we don't get to tell many of the stories because they're confidential, but periodically things happen that make a real difference. And one of the things that I could maybe use as an example was when I was in St Helens. I'd been chaplain there for 6 years, and the fitness coach asked me if I would go to the changing rooms because one of the players was asking for me. When I got to the changing rooms, he was sitting under the Sky TV camera so they couldn't see him. I sat beside him and asked him what was up, and he said that his life was in a complete mess. I can't use the language that he used, but you get the general drift. And he went on to tell me that he was struggling with drugs. He was an alcoholic. His wife was an alcoholic. Their marriage was on the rocks. Their children were running riot. He'd lost his form and now he was injured. And he was a very robust player who seldom ever got injured. And he looked at me with tears in his eyes and he said to me, "Phil, I know I've got to get God into the center of my life. Can you help me do that?" And so I led him to Christ there in the changing rooms on this away game that we were playing. And one of the fitness coach, his wife, led this lad's wife to Jesus, and we watched their lives just turn around. The thing about that story that is such a good illustration is I'd been his chaplain for 6 years, and he'd never once asked me anything spiritual. I just simply cared for him and the rest of the team. But when the right moment came, he knew who he could turn to, and find help to allow Jesus to be at the centre of his life. We see that story repeating itself in New Zealand and all over the place. People who would never go near church, and yet because we are there standing alongside them, good weather and bad, winning and losing, good times and terrible times, then when there are difficulties come, they will come and talk to us and ask our help, and we're able to be there for them. So in many ways, our chaplains build a fence at the top of the cliff, but they also attend the bottom when there's been a terrible tragedy. Last year, I was asked by Motorsport New Zealand to provide support for a couple whose son had been killed in a rally accident. And so I've journeyed with them over this year, meeting them numerous times. They are a Presbyterian couple, and I was able to help them as they began to work through the terrible grief and trauma that they'd experienced by losing their one son. Motorsport New Zealand has asked us to provide sports chaplains for all their circuits, for all of their rallies, and for as many of their sports motorsport clubs that would have one. And so right now I'm trying to find the funding to make that possible. So one specific thing I would ask for is prayer for about $75,000 that we're going to need to be able to get on with making motorsport chaplaincy happen as part of who we are and what we do. So let me finish with this. We have 7,000 sports clubs in Aotearoa, New Zealand, all of whom would benefit from a chaplain. There's a massive opportunity for Christians to be good news in our community if we care to accept it. But it starts with us going. And unfortunately, so often we're so busy with what we're doing back at home base that we don't think too much about going and investing our lives into our community. I invite churches to do three things: to pray. Please pray for us. Pray with us. And I take people's mobile number and I send them a text every week or two, giving them an update of what's going on so they can pray. We ask people to join us as donors, as people who will support our small core team of those who are living by faith. And then thirdly, we say, what about going? Being a sports chaplain is a wonderful opportunity to serve the Lord in this generation in a way that has been accepted when we find other forms of mission and evangelism are being rejected by our society. So thank you. Thank you so much for being willing to pray for us. And I'm really excited to have the opportunity to share. So I'll hand it all back to you, Elizabeth.